Well, hi there. Okay, now, one of the most important things about science is making sure that you are safe in the lab. And so, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the rules that we need to make sure we follow when we are doing different lab activities. Make sure that you set up your paper in the proper Cornell format. Make sure that you have the date at the top of the page in the top right-hand corner, that you have that line going down about 2.5 inches in from the left-hand side, and make sure that you have now your three sections. You have a place for your notes, you have a place for your questions, and now you've got a place for your summary as well. Our topic, which should go across the top, is science safety rules. And here we can see we have our essential question. How can we be safe in the lab? So that's what we're going to learn about today. Well, one of the most important things is you don't want to work in a cluttered area. So only bring the materials that you need to your lab station. If all you need is your lab paper and your interactive notebook to record your data, then that's all you bring. You want to make sure that you start out right. The more cluttered, the more likely you are to have an accident or to spill something. And so only bring what you need. You want to make sure that you tie back loose clothing and remove any dangling jewelry. You don't want your jewelry to dangle into a burner or maybe to get chemicals on it, because then that's really going to ruin your day. Make sure you tie back long hair. Put it up in a ponytail. Put it up in a clip. You can take it back down as soon as you're done. Don't wear open-toed shoes. You must wear closed-toed shoes when you are doing a lab. You don't want to spill something on your bare foot. And of course, you don't want to drop something on your foot either. So it's really important it's really important to wear closed-toed shoes. Now, something that you might want to remember is that most hair products are flammable, which means they're going to catch on fire. And so if you use a lot of hair products in your hair, be very careful. Make sure you know where the fire extinguisher and fire blanket are located. Usually they're going to be by the door. Make sure that your teacher tells you how to use those items if you need to. Make sure you know where the eye wash is and safety shower, just in case. They might be in the back of the room, they might be in the front of the room, but make sure you know where they are just in case you need them. Know the emergency evacuation route. If there is a fire in the building, you want to make sure you know how to get out of the building safely and where you need to go. Now, to avoid a lot of these problems when you're doing a lab, make sure you read the lab procedure before starting so you know what you're going to be expected to do. Of course, never work alone in the lab. You want to make sure that someone is always around just in case something happens. Do the lab the way the teacher tells you to. Make sure you follow that procedure the way the teacher has asked you to perform the lab. You might want to do something else which could lead to accidents, so make sure you follow the procedure. Don't eat or drink in the lab. You do not know what has been at that lab table before you got there with that food. They're probably pretty dirty. You don't want to put your food down on that lab desk or your drink. You don't want to set it down on that lab desk and then eat or drink that food and maybe get those chemicals or dirt in your system. Don't put on makeup in the lab. I know this sounds silly, but for the same reason. You're going to be touching a lab bench that has had chemicals on it, that has had other people working there, lots of dirt, and things that you don't want to get on your skin. Wear safety equipment if the procedure tells you to. If the procedure asks you to wear goggles, make sure you have on your goggles. If it asks you to wear an apron or gloves, whatever it happens to be, make sure you are wearing the proper safety equipment. So should something happen, you're prepared. Always use goggles when using heat or chemicals. What happens when something heats up? If it's something like water, it bubbles. If it's something like chemicals, it could bubble and spit out a little bit of the chemical. And so you want to make sure that you have goggles on and they're protecting your eyes. Why would you wear an apron? Well, to avoid stains or something spilling on you. If you knock a beaker over, it might just be water. It might have chemicals in it. But if you have that apron to protect you, you're going to avoid any hazard. Now, this might seem silly, but you always want to cut away from yourself, not towards yourself. If you slip and you're cutting towards yourself, you could easily hurt yourself. So just be careful with that. Don't hold up the object you're cutting. You want to put the object down on the lab bench in front of you. This is a biggie. Don't use chipped or cracked glassware. You're going to be heating and cooling glassware. It might be with a Bunsen burner or it might be with a hot plate. But if that glassware is chipped or cracked, as it's heating and cooling and heating and cooling, that crack or chip can get worse. And then whatever is in that container, if it breaks, could spill all over you. Or you could get a cut with the broken glass. So just don't use it. Let your teacher know and they'll get you a fresh piece of glassware. Don't heat wet glassware. You don't know what that wet thing is. And then that's going to start, boiling up. Who knows? Don't do it. Don't reach across a hot plate or a Bunsen burner. It's hot. Whatever's on it is getting hot. And that steam is going to be rising. And if you're reaching across it, you could easily hurt yourself. So just be really careful with that. Don't use electric equipment with a frayed cord. If you notice that the cord on the piece of equipment your teacher has out for you is frayed or ripped, or it's cracking and the wires are exposed, that's a dangerous situation. And so don't use it. Tell your teacher and they'll get you a new piece of equipment. Make sure that if you're using a piece of equipment with a cord, that it's not dangling down onto the floor where someone can trip on it. Then they're going to trip on it, they're going to pull the piece of equipment, you're going to knock your whole lab station over. Don't use electricity with wet hands. You're going to shock yourself. It's going to hurt. Don't touch, taste, or smell a chemical unless you are told to do so. Some of the stuff that you might be working with, you don't want to touch. It could irritate your skin. You don't want to taste it. Sorry about that. If you touch something and you're not sure what it is, it could irritate your skin. You don't want to taste something. If it's a chemical, it could make you sick. And you don't want to smell something. Strong chemicals can actually be quite harmful. So what you do want to do, let me go back for a second, is you want to waft. You want to blow the chemical very gently into your face to smell it. You don't want to stick your nose in the container. Don't mix chemicals unless you're told to. You don't know how they're going to react, and so you want to be careful with that. Don't heat a test tube and point it at anyone. Test tubes are pretty small. There's nowhere for that heated material to go except straight out the top. And if you're pointing that at somebody, it could cause them harm. And because you started right, we want to end right. Make sure you clean up your area when you're done. Make sure you wash your hands at the end of the lab. You've been working with chemicals, so you want to make sure you wash your hands and dry them well. Dispose of waste in the way that the teacher tells you. Most of the stuff we work with is going to be able to go down the drain and then in the garbage or in the garbage can. But just in case, make sure you follow your teacher's directions. If there's an emergency, tell your teacher immediately. It is not up to you to take care of everything. You need to let your teacher know so that they can take care of whatever kind of emergency it is correctly. If there is a fire, you want to make sure you tell your teacher and leave the room. Remember that evacuation route we talked about earlier. Make sure you leave calmly. Okay. Now, if something terrible happens and for whatever reason you catch on fire, which I'm sure isn't going to happen, remember, stop, drop, and roll. Your lab partner will get the fire blanket and they will help to put you out, but do not run. Oxygen is required by fire. If you're running, you're feeding the fire. So stop, drop, and roll. If you spill anything, just tell your teacher. It's going to happen, and that's okay. But make sure you tell your teacher because some of the stuff might need to be cleaned up in a certain way. And, of course, we don't want anybody to slip or get it on themselves. So, again, just tell the teacher. Okay, hopefully you learned about lab safety today, and hopefully you know everything you need to now to be prepared for those lab activities. Have a great day.